Everyone saw it before I did, his hand, slipping into hers, like it belonged there. Like mine, never had a place at all. The moment Daniel walked into the ballroom with Elena on his arm, it felt as if the chandeliers dimmed just to highlight my humiliation. People stopped mid-conversation, mid-sip, mid-smile. The room didn't breathe. Neither did I. They were all waiting for the exact second my heart shattered loud enough for the violins to drown in it. And I knew, with one look at his confident stride, that Daniel had planned it this way. He came to the gala not to end things privately, kindly, respectfully, but to break me with the sharpest audience possible. What he didn't expect was that the part of me he aimed to destroy had already died long before this night, leaving behind a woman who would rise in ways he could never imagine. The music softened as he approached, almost as if the orchestra sensed tragedy coming. Elena's dress shimmered with deliberate cruelty, the kind of sparkle chosen not for beauty but for victory. I had seen her once, years ago, when Daniel told me she taught him the meaning of betrayal. He said she broke his trust so brutally that he swore never to give someone that kind of power again. But here she was, standing beside him like a promise he never stopped wanting. I wasn't prepared for the sight, how their bodies aligned so easily, how her smile curled with familiarity, how his eyes lit with something that wasn't shock or regret but satisfaction. When they reached me, he didn't lower his voice, didn't step aside, didn't hide the fact that he was ready for the world to watch my downfall. "Mia," he said, smiling that polished, perfect smile that had fooled me for too long. "We should stop pretending." I blinked, hoping his words meant anything other than what they obviously meant. "Pretending what?" I forced out, though my throat felt scraped raw. He glanced at Elena as if she were a trophy and I was the losing team. "Pretending this relationship is going anywhere. I'm going back to what feels real." The room collectively inhaled. I heard someone whisper something that sounded like, "Oh my God." Elena's fingers tightened softly around his arm, as if to make sure he wouldn't waver. And Daniel looked at me with that calm, rehearsed detachment a surgeon uses before making the first incision. He expected the cut to be clean, expected me to bleed quietly, expected me to shrink into a corner like an abandoned secret. That was his mistake. My heart stung. Yes. My pride trembled, absolutely. But something inside me, something buried deep under years of adjusting myself to keep him comfortable, rose like a warning flame. I could feel it in my spine, in my lungs, in the steadiness forming in my chest. I swallowed the pain, steadied my voice, and said thank you for finally being honest, truly. I hope she was worth every lie. The reaction was immediate. Elena stiffened. Daniel's fake smile cracked for half a second, and the people watching leaned closer, hungry for the next blow. But I didn't give them the performance Daniel wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg. Instead, I turned around and walked away, heels echoing against the marble like the first beat of a new beginning. Each step felt like dragging the remnants of a dying version of myself across a battlefield. I knew people were whispering, pointing, analyzing every second of what happened. But the more distance I put between me and Daniel, the lighter the air felt around me. It was as if the night itself had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I slipped out onto the balcony, needing space, needing air that wasn't thick with eyes. The cool night drifted against my skin, soothing the heat of humiliation burning beneath it. I gripped the railing, trying to steady my heartbeat. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the pain have space. It throbbed in every corner of me, memories, moments, plans we made, promises I believed. They all collapsed quietly inside my chest. I didn't cry, not yet. But my body trembled with the effort it took to stay upright. Then a voice came from behind me, soft but grounded, familiar yet unexpected. "You handled that with more strength than anyone else in there would have." I turned, startled, and found myself staring into the eyes of Adrian Hale. The Adrian Hale, a man whose mere presence could reshape a room. A man whispered about in business circles like he was a myth walking in tailored suits. I'd met him once briefly at a fundraiser 2 years ago. I never thought he'd remember me. "You don't have to stand alone," he said, stepping closer but keeping enough distance for me to breathe. His expression wasn't pity, not even close. It was curiosity tinged with something warmer, something steady. "I saw everything," he added quietly. "And I saw how you walked away. That wasn't weakness, Mia. That was power. Power." The word wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. I let out a shaky laugh. I felt anything but powerful. Adrian shook his head, eyes never leaving mine. "People who break usually cling. You didn't. You chose yourself, even in pain. That's strength." No one had ever said something like that to me. Daniel always treated my composure as obligation, not courage, my silence as convenience, not resilience. But Adrian saw something different, something I hadn't even seen in myself. The ballroom buzzed behind us, but out on the balcony, it felt like we were suspended in a quieter universe. A safer one. Adrian didn't press me with questions, didn't dig into the pieces of my heartbreak, didn't try to fix me. He simply existed beside me still. Steady, present. For the first time that night, my breath settled. I glanced at the ballroom through the glass. Daniel was watching us. His jaw tightened, his expression twisting with something sharp and unspoken. Maybe confusion, maybe irritation, maybe the first flicker of a regret he wasn't ready to name. But back then I didn't understand it. I didn't realize that Adrian's presence alone was enough to disrupt the narrative Daniel had written for the night. His plan was simple: break me, walk away, feel triumphant. But the universe had already rewritten the script. When the gala ended and guests began leaving in pairs of gossip and scandal, Adrian approached me again. "If you're up for it," he said gently, "I'd like to take you to dinner tomorrow. Not as a man trying to replace someone, but as someone who sees you. Really sees you." I hesitated. I wasn't ready. I wasn't healed. But something about him, his calm, his sincerity, his refusal to make my pain about him, felt like a breath after drowning. "Dinner is okay," I whispered. As I rode home that night, I realized something felt different. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel destroyed. I felt unburdened. Something inside me had shifted. Daniel thought dumping me in public would define me, but instead, it freed me from a future shaped by someone who never saw my worth. I stepped out of the car, looked up at the night sky, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest spark of destiny whispering at the edges of my life. And though I didn't know it yet, that spark would grow into a flame bright enough to burn every expectation Daniel ever had of me, because the man who would become my husband had already been in that room, and was already watching. People think the real twist in my story is that I married a man more powerful, more gentle, and more devoted than the one who discarded me. But the truth is this: the biggest shock wasn't my new marriage at all. It was the moment Daniel finally understood that I had stopped orbiting his world, that I had built a new one, where he no longer had a name, a place, or a shadow. Life after the gala began quietly. No dramatic realizations, no instant healing, no sudden transformation. Just slow, steady breaths that didn't hurt as much as the day before. I met Adrian for dinner the next evening, half convinced I'd cancel. But something inside me whispered that showing up was not about moving on quickly. It was about choosing myself again, piece by piece, moment by moment. And when I walked into that restaurant and saw him already standing, waiting for me with a soft, genuine smile, the ache in my chest eased a little more. He didn't mention the gala. He didn't mention Daniel. Instead, he talked about travel, books, favorite meals, stories of small coincidences that shaped big outcomes. He made me laugh. Not the polite laugh I used to give Daniel when he expected it, but the kind that escapes unexpectedly and reminds you that joy still lives in you, even if you haven't felt it in a while. At one point, he said, "You know, you don't seem like someone who was abandoned. You seem like someone who outgrew the place she was standing." And those words stayed with me long after the plates were cleared. Days became weeks, and something beautiful unfolded. Not a whirlwind romance, not a dramatic rebound, but a quiet companionship that felt like two souls learning to breathe the same air. He listened without trying to fix me. He encouraged without pushing. He admired without possessing. With Adrian, love didn't feel like a performance or a negotiation. It felt like a gentle, steady return to myself. Daniel, however, felt the shift almost immediately. He reached out after a few weeks first, with a text, then a call, then a long, apologetic email filled with words I once would have begged to hear. "I made a mistake. I didn't know seeing you walk away would feel like losing everything. But something in me had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurting in the way he hoped. The part of me that once clung to him had quietly let go the night I walked away from him at the gala. Still, I knew I needed closure. Not because I wanted him back, but because I deserved to finish the chapter he ended carelessly. So I met him for coffee one afternoon. He arrived looking smaller, somehow less sure, less polished. "Mia," he started, voice cracking slightly, "I didn't expect to see you tonight with him." Adrian, the name he refused to say directly. I simply nodded. "I didn't expect any of this either," I replied honestly. "But I'm glad it happened." His brows knit together in confusion. "Glad? After what I did?" "Especially after what you did," I said. It forced me to see what I should have walked away from long ago. Daniel reached for my hand, but I pulled back gently. You still love me, he whispered, desperate. I see it. I shook my head. You see who I used to be, the version you shaped. But that girl is gone now. And sitting across from him, I realized it was true. The pain had transformed into something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. My relationship with Adrian deepened naturally. Every moment with him felt like sunlight melting away old frost. He learned my boundaries, respected my silence, celebrated my small victories. When he held my hand, it didn't feel like possession, it felt like partnership. When he kissed me, it didn't feel like conquest, it felt like connection. The day he told me, I want to build a life with you, not around you, I felt something rooted inside me finally bloom. Months passed, and one evening, while we walked through a quiet garden after dinner, Adrian stopped beneath a lantern-lit archway. His eyes were steady, unwavering. Mia, he said, voice soft but certain, I don't want to rush you. I don't want to replace anything in your past, but you've become the calm in my storm. The reason my world makes sense in a way I didn't know it could. If your heart is ready, I'd be honored to give you the safest home I can. Will you marry me? My breath caught, not because of the proposal, but because of the way he said it, with tenderness, not desperation, with love, not expectation. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was stepping into a future shaped by someone else's needs. I was choosing my own future. So I said yes. Our wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the grand displays Daniel always dreamed of. It was filled with warm light, soft music, and genuine joy. I chose a simple dress, elegant and effortless, something that felt like me, not like a version molded to impress. My closest friends surrounded me, supportive and protective, reminding me how far I had come. I didn't expect Daniel to show up that day. I didn't expect him to even know about the wedding, but fate, as always, has a peculiar sense of timing. As I stepped out of the car, bouquet in hand, veil lightly brushing my shoulders, I froze. There he was, Daniel, leaning against the stone wall of the venue, eyes wide as if he had just stumbled upon the end of a story he didn't know he was still in. The moment he saw me, everything in his face crumbled. Regret, longing, shock, all fighting for expression at once. Mia, he breathed, stepping toward me. You're marrying him. His voice cracked like a fault line breaking. You're supposed to come back to me. I thought you'd realize we belong together. I stood still, steady, feeling no hate but no attachment either. Daniel, I said softly, I did come back. But not to you, to myself. He shook his head, tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. I lost you because I made a stupid mistake. I wasn't thinking. You didn't lose me because of a mistake, I interrupted gently. You lost me because you believed I needed you to survive. You never thought I could stand without you. But I did. I do. And now I'm choosing someone who never asked me to shrink. At that moment, Adrian walked out from the entrance, calm and composed, his presence grounding me in a way Daniel's never had. He placed a hand on my lower back, not possessive, just reassuring. Daniel's eyes flicked between us, realization settling on him like a weight he wasn't strong enough to hold. I was your beginning, he whispered brokenly. No, I said, shaking my head gently. You were my lesson. A hard one, but a necessary one. Daniel stepped back, defeated. Please don't do this, he murmured. I gave him a sad, final smile. I already did. As I walked toward the aisle with Adrian, not once did I look back. My vows were not just a promise to love him. They were a promise to honor the woman I had become. A woman who chose love that didn't hurt. A woman who chose peace over drama. A woman who chose a future not defined by heartbreak, but rebuilt by hope. Daniel left quietly before the ceremony ended, and I realized something important. The blow he never saw coming wasn't my marriage. It was the truth that my happiness no longer depended on him at all. And that is how losing me became his unexpected ending, and how finding myself became my most beautiful beginning.